Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to rise today to speak to Bill 7 on affordable housing. As a former Toronto City Councillor, I dealt with this issue at almost every council. I would hope that the government listens, that they would amend this legislation. Speaker, as a councillor, I've been implementing affordable housing policy as prescribed by this government. The problem is that despite our valiant efforts in the City of Toronto, the crisis in housing, especially affordable housing, continues and is getting worse. I have to give this government some credit for talking about affordable housing, but the reality is that the results speak a different message. Every year, the problem gets worse. Every year, the waiting list for affordable housing hits a new record high. It is now at over 170,000 families in Ontario. That's an increase of over 45,000 families since 2003, when this government took office. That is an average 3,481 more families on the affordable housing waiting list every year that this government has been in power. To put this in perspective, that increase is bigger than the number of people who live in my riding, Scarborough-Rouge River. Speaker, this is not just about availability of affordable housing stock. One of the best tests is the period of time one waits on the waiting list. Before this government took office in 2003, a senior on the waiting list was housed in about 2.5 years. Now, the waiting period is about 4.4 years. Wow. This is a big increase of 76%. 76% in the waiting period. I don't think this is a fair waiting period for anyone, especially when it deals with our most vulnerable population. Our seniors deserve better treatment. Single adults, couples were waiting on the waiting list 3.4 years in 2003. 13 years later, under the Liberal government, they have to wait 3.9 years. This is roughly 15% more time in the waiting list. Families on the waiting list in 2003 would have been on the waiting list 2.3 years on average. Now, they wait 3.7 years. That is more than 50% increase. Speaker, most affordable housing in the Toronto area is provided by the Toronto Community Housing. But provincial underfunding of the backlog of repairs to the tune of $863 million is risking 7,582 of the units closing and kicking 7,582 families out on the street. There is no sense in trying to build affordable housing one unit at a time. If we lose 7,500 units due to underfunding by this government, Speaker, it would take a lifetime to build 7,500 affordable housing units. Let's not lose what we already have. Let me talk about some of the successes that we had in the city. In 1993, 2 buildings were built in my riding by Metro Housing, now called the Toronto Community Housing. It was the typical Toronto Community Housing at 1315 Nielsen Road with 126 units. The other building next door with 124 units was a pilot project named the Metro Guaranteed Equity Housing. The residents of the latter project were seniors that were willing to contribute $107,000 toward their condo ownership. Their maintenance fee, that is inclusive of all costs, is about $800 per month, regardless of their income. In return, They enjoyed their privately managed building with an elected board of directors that have a direct oversight on the management. The residents in this building are extremely happy with their accommodation. When they leave out, they get the down payment back. The great news is that the cost of maintenance is $0 to the taxpayers of the city. Compared to the first building, which cost the city annually about $125,000 to $150,000 a year, there are proven ways to build affordable housing if the legislation permits. The second example is Habitat for Humanity, Mr. Speaker. I'm very happy to report that I have 3 different Habitat for Humanity projects in my riding. In fact, I have more Habitat for Humanity units in my riding than all of the rest of the city of Toronto combined. The reality is that the Habitat for Humanity provides a form of affordable housing ownership, but would need a more permissive inclusionary zoning. Speaker, please let me make a few suggestions, and I hope that the government is listening and will amend this legislation. The government must proceed cautiously as it finalizes the legislation and regulations to ensure the cost to deliver new affordable homes is not passed on to the renters and purchasers of the other homes in the market, unfairly driving up their housing costs and making their homes less affordable. A successful inclusionary zoning policy must foster a balanced partnership among all stakeholders to leverage the growth in Ontario's housing markets to create more affordable housing. The government must not pass the affordable housing buck onto the municipalities and expect inclusionary zoning to solve the province's affordable housing crisis. The government has a central and ongoing role partnering with the federal and municipal governments to work together to address affordable housing issues. Inclusionary zoning can be part of the toolkit, but it's not the only solution. The legislation and regulations need to provide more information about how inclusionary zoning is to be implemented. The bill is also too restrictive when it comes to applying the inclusionary zoning, so much so that it will actually prevent municipalities from fully benefiting from the power of inclusionary zoning. The province must change the bill to allow for the provision of off-site affordable homes possible in limited circumstances to ensure that affordable housing contribution is always provided. This flexible approach could apply in defined circumstances, such as high-end luxury buildings with a high operating cost or small building with a financial limitation, which make operating affordable housing unsustainable. In closing, this proposed legislation is intending to create more affordable housing, to get people off the long waiting list. I'm afraid that the only way people will be getting off this list soon will be if they move out of this province. Wow. I strongly urge the government to look at real solutions, like I mentioned earlier, to make living more affordable for all Ontarians and provide the housing and services for people who really need them. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very nicely done, Raymond.
Question, comments, member from Hamilton Mountain.